John's Yamaha. I've got some numbers. FSX730. No, it's an FSX730SC BS. Wow, they have loads of numbers. Made in China. Yamaha, good guitars. So, a purdy thing. Leopard skin, or tortoiseshell. Whatchamacallit, scratch plate. Nice little jack plug unit, socket unit, and screwed in to hopefully a solid block in the back there. Well, no doubt it will be. A joint up there on the headstock. Is it the scarf joint they call it at the end of that one? A couple of dings in the edge here. Which we could fill for the fun of it if John wanted it, but we shall see. But otherwise you can't really feel them, so what we've got is some very old strings. Nice warm tone. And a high playing action at the end. So we've got, I know this from having a conversation with John about this to begin with, so let's just look at what we've got going on here. So typical acoustic guitar. Let's use this. It's a bit big for the purpose, but let's use it anyway. So typical acoustic guitar, nice quality, nothing wrong with it, everything's good about it, but becoming a bit difficult to play. So let's have a look down this end. Well, we've got what looks like a bone nut, which is nicely fitted. Maybe I heard a ping or two on there, so it may need a little bit of tiny bit of nut work. Also, the first fret action is quite high, and it's in my book it's unnecessarily high, even for an acoustic, which will make it harder to play. But we're also struggling down here with some high action. Now, there's a fair bit of material in the saddle still left. But in a way, the first thing you kind of say to yourself when you see a guitar is, or I do anyway, is what's causing this action to be so high? Did it come out of the factory like that? Well, probably not far off, but I don't think it would be as high as this. So currently we're looking, I think John already gave me these readings, but I'll do it again just for the sake of it. My way of reading it, we're looking at 3.5, in fact, yeah, 3.5, 3.5 mils at the last fret, which is a 1.5 more than I would want to play with. And let's check what we're looking at this end. And on the high E, we're looking at just over 2.5. So typically, what I would personally be looking for is 2 on the last fret low E and 1.5 on an acoustic on the high E. So basically we're minusing 1 to 1.5. That's the kind of reduction that we want as measured as I do it at the last fret. Just a quick sort of look under here. I mean, show how bad my guesswork is. Eyeballing it, I would say that first fret action is probably about 0.8, something like that. I could be very embarrassingly wrong, so that's 0.7. I'm wrong. It's probably over 0.6 then. That's good. I'm overestimating. 0.4, 0.2. Okay, let's say 0.5. It's about on the half, but the next one along is quite a bit higher. So a variety of things, but around about 0.5 or a little bit more, which again is unnecessarily high. You could easily have, certainly on the, yeah, they're all inconsistent. So I would aim for a 0.4 most all the way across. There's a bit of reduction, and also in doing a slight reduction there, we can also tidy up, stop the pinging that was happening. So that's the quick sort of look at the actions, and then having a look at the neck relief. There's a little bit of neck relief in there. Again, about, I would say it's hard to do this. Some people, how was it? Dave in Texas Guitar Channel. He's got this amazing sort of technique where he just kind of puts the feeler gauge in and can sort of feel it. So I don't know. I wouldn't mind if it was wired up and it went buzz or something, but I can't for the life of me feel it. I have to look and see, is it catching? No, it's a bit higher than that. Maybe you can see the gap. Oh yeah. I mean, you can make it play. That's one way of doing it. Put it under there and go. Something like that, but I'd love it if it was like the old Operation. What was that game where you followed a wire? That would be really handy. Go, but I think that's slightly over that. So that's 0.2. So we're around about 0.3. For an acoustic guitar, you'd probably, I'm saying probably, you probably want a little bit more relief in the neck than you would with an electric. Why? Because arguably you might be striking the strings harder, and that they might need a bit more room to spin. But again, it's one of those things that I totally recommend you do it to your taste, and the best way to do it is to try it out. And if you never do make any adjustments, you'll never know what it does or doesn't do if you just kind of shy away from doing it, which is a real shame. Now I'm trying to think where the doobie things went. Right here. God, I need to tidy up yet again. It's always at that state of play, isn't it? Let's see which one is the one. Any chance of this one fitting? Probably not. I could probably see if I looked in there. Could it be this one? Yeah. Okay, so we could give it a tiny little bit of tighten, just to take a wee fraction out of that. But of course, it might not take effect instantly. That's nice and flat actually. It's still got some room. Okay, so that's okay. That's the neck seems to respond. That's good. The nut is bone, which is good. Needs probably a little adjustment there to get, certainly to get these consistent heights. Also, we can free up the slot so that there's no chance of any gripping and pinging, and therefore going out of tune. But the question is how did the action get high? And if you look at the, well, you can see this. If you look down the back of the guitar and we get a flat edge, and we put it over the back of the guitar like this, you can see there's quite a roll going on. Doesn't really matter how long the thing is, as long as it gets to the edge, you can see the curvature of, or the bulging, slight bulge upwards. Now it's not massive on this guitar, and I barely, in this climate, the UK, I barely ever, I don't think in fact I've ever seen a flat top completely there. Somebody might say to me, oh well, that's because they're all made that way, so you got it wrong from the start. I'm totally prepared to accept that's true. I may have got it wrong, but I do, as from what I've understood, is that this top was a flat piece of wood, and it's obviously carefully braced and glued in to a frame, you know, curved and moulded frame. And the idea would be that this in an ideal situation would be flat as it is across here. You'll probably find if you take strings off, take the scratch plate off, this will probably register as much flatter than this, and typically you would expect this to be flat. Now you expect this to be bowed somewhat, or not as flat. It has a curve to it because it just does. But this one you'd expect to be a flat top, hence the name. And if it's slightly lifted up here, then what happens is when it lifts, you tend to find the action will raise too. It's a natural part of it. It's going to take the bridge up with it. From what I've understood, this is fairly common in guitars in this country because of our environment that we live in. So it's, as you might be able to hear right now, it is typical British winter, late January. It's piddling with rain, everything is damp. And so this guitar, if it's lived in the UK, kind of gets that for a lot of the year. And even in the summer times, it doesn't get really that dry, not like Arizona dry. So over years, it's quite common for guitars to belly a little bit. And what happens is, in doing so, they still sound great and everything, but you tend to find the action starts to raise up. If it gets really bad, when the more curved this becomes, the less possible it is for the bridge to stay down, because the bridge is actually made flat. And the curvature of a flat thing on a bent thing, the two things kind of part company, and eventually it pivots forward on its front edge and snaps off if it gets really bad. But it can be quite a good test to see if you have a problem. I mean, there is a little bit of rising here. It's reflected in the action. Is it bad yet? Well, no, because you can see from here that the back of the bridge is still firmly, or seems to be firmly glued to the top. So the curvature of this hasn't become so great that it's forcing a split or forcing the joint to break, but eventually may do if it progresses over time. So in a medium-aged guitar like this, that's typically the first thing I'll see. What's the remedy of this? Well, technically speaking, the remedy is to dehumidify it. John's got a great case for this. And I don't know how long it's been in that case, or whether this sort of level of slight bowing, curvature, bellying is the best that case can give with a bit of silica gel and so on. I don't know, but so the kind of long-term cure for this would be to make sure it was stored in a humidity controlled environment so that it resisted, this didn't swell up any more than it currently is. So in that would be a sort of mid-term solution to try and gently dehumidify the top. And I'm terrible because most of my acoustic, well, I've only got one at the moment, but typically when I've had acoustics, they'll either hang on a wall where you can get them off the peg quickly to play them, because that's the point of them, or they'll live in a soft case or something like that. So I've not been very good at that at all. So typically mine have all got a little bit of that, or have had a little bit of that bellying too. So in the short term, when that happens, all you can really do is work with the saddle here. So there is a bit of adjustment room in most cases you can get from the saddle. You'll know pretty well if that's the case, because you'll see enough saddle material up above the surface of the bridge piece, and you'll see straight away that there will be some amount that you can take down. Now the amount you can take down is kind of limited by, let me get the thing off the thing. It's limited by a couple of things. Right? The first one is how much is there already. So if this has been a much loved old guitar, somebody may already have taken this down in an attempt over time to sort of combat some of the rising or some of the lifting action. In which case you might find that this is pretty low in the slot, and significantly, even more importantly, what you would see would be that you'd see this physically low in the slot, but you'd note that there would hardly be any angle going over the saddle here, and for this guitar to transmit its string vibrations through to the top, it does need a certain amount of angle for the strings to kind of press hard against this bridge. And don't forget this saddle. And don't forget this saddle also transmits the vibration of these strings down into the piezo strip, which signal from which goes to the preamp here. So kind of tension and angle of these strings over the saddle is an important part of how this guitar makes its noise. So you have to be kind of careful not to reduce your height of your saddle so far that you get a nice low action, but so far that you lose any pressure or tension or force, i.e. the angle here becomes virtually a flat line or close to. So I don't know, lots of people have lots of different views about the optimal angle for this, and it's one of those things that you can get into long and unfruitful arguments about. My experience of doing this is you have to employ sort of pragmatism. Okay, it needs more than 5 degrees in my book to be on the safe side. Any less than that, and you're kind of starting to lose some of the force of this. Now think about it. It's not going to lose it completely. You've still got a fully tensioned string sitting on an object, and it's being pushed into the piezo. And the truth is, you can go to a very low angle here and you'll still hear it pick up and transmit out to your amplifier, and it will sound great. So you have to go a long way before you lose it. But purists will argue quite understandably about the impact of the changing of this angle, or the reducing of the saddle, and its impact on the resultant tone. That's fine, and it's a real discussion. But the issue here is with a non-high-end, let's say, or a reasonable mid-price guitar or whatever. I'm not sure the price point of these, but on a let's say it's a £400 guitar. It may not be that, but let's say it is. Short of doing that, your longer term solution has to be to dehumidify this to reduce the action naturally through lowering the curvature in the top a little bit, but it won't probably get you all the way to where you'd like to go, and so a bit of adjustment there would be good. That's the kind of things you can work with. The only other option on a guitar, when it's after years and years, what you can find is that the neck sinks at this end a bit into the it gets pulled into the body of the guitar, and sometimes this joint here splits a little, or even if it doesn't, sometimes it can bend. The actual neck itself can bend a little bit. What you've choices there, the only options there is to take this whole unit out and realign the neck geometry so it's now pointing in a different angle, so that whatever this is doing, you now bring the neck up to meet the strings, so you've got a brand new angle. Now, brand new angle, highly commendable, Seaside Rendezvous, Queen. So, Day at the Races. No, Night at the Opera. But the thing is, that's a very expensive, time-consuming process, and from what I've looked at, I've never done it, and I don't think I would want to either. I'm not that kind. I'm not a repairman in that sense. It's a typical cost of about £600, and even when you look at the list of work involved in doing a full neck reset on a guitar to rebalance the geometry to cope with whatever's happened down here, or the overall structure of the guitar, even if a luthier charged 600 quid, that's hardly any money for the actual sheer volume of effort required to make this thing to go through a neck reset on a thing like this. So it's economically unviable for most budget range instruments, and if you know this is a really top quality Yamaha, then I haven't googled it or anything. I'm just looking at what's in front of me, so don't laugh. But yeah, if it's a mid-price range, £200–300 range guitar, then that kind of effort, unless it's got high sentimental value, it clearly isn't. It doesn't have an economic logic behind it. Obviously, people do that for historic guitars or high-price guitars, or things with huge sentimental value too. It's worth spending the money. So what I'm saying is, despite the fact that there are changes to the way the strings transmit the vibrations through to the piezo pickup and the body of the guitar, by altering the height of the saddle, in most people's cases, in most cases, the only viable option, short of a neck reset, is to do exactly that. Okay, so it is, it may not be fantastic in some ways to want to do that, but practically speaking, there isn't really an alternative. Let's say this isn't an expensive guitar. Let's say this is a 150 quid acoustic. The truth is, if this has absorbed loads of good old British winter moisture, if you can't afford the time or the money or whatever, it's not very expensive. But if you can't avoid the time, I can't afford the time to hellfire. I'm probably going to be making bleeps. No, I'm not. If you can't afford the time or the money, it's not very expensive, but the time to get this dehumidified a bit more, then your only option is to reduce the height. And if that gives you another year or two's playing out of a guitar that cost you £150, then it's what you have to do. So in this case, this action is rising, the neck joint is solid, it doesn't appear to be, certainly not in that age of guitar where it's looking to need a neck reset. But so we're kind of looking at adjustments of the saddle on this. Now, I would always say to somebody, if you want to preserve the flatness of this top and help arrest the increasing action, definitely consider getting it maybe a week or 10 days or 2 weeks, whatever it is, course of dehumidification in a shop that does that. And I've heard good reports of the places people have taken their guitars to, and it does make a substantial difference to how this action feels. But short of that, the very short-term solution is to adjust it here. Now, if somebody takes my advice and we adjust it here now to make it play better today, and then over the mid-term, they start to dehumidify this in one of several ways, and the action goes down even further, then you may find that you need to throw this out and put a taller one back in. Okay, so it's not going to be a permanent state of affairs if you know that this can be adjusted by dehumidification. But the guitar is sent to me as in, it's nice, I like it, I like how it sounds, but I can't play it at the moment. It's getting hard to play. So what I'm looking at straight away is how much is the angle here? It's pretty tall angle over here, so we've got quite a bit to play with. What did I say we could, to make an action I'd like, we need to lose 1.5 mils here. Okay, or we could do it the other way. We could say if it's 1.5 mils at the last fret, we could go to the 12th fret and go, it's we said it's 3.5 at the last fret, and here it's, I'm going to borrow this a minute because I can't see a darn thing. It's just under 3, so we got half a mil's difference between here and here. But let's say that's 3, and we want that to be about, I suppose, what do we want? 1.5-ish, 1.75. It's hard to guess it up. But if we want 1.75 and it's, what did we say, 3, then that's 1.25 we need to take off as measured there. And what we know is that it will be double that. So as a guess, 1.25 will be 2.5. Okay, so and so what I would say is, if we're removing 1.5 here and it's 2/3 of the way along, 3/4 of the way along, which it isn't quite, 1.5 here turns into at least 2 there, just to be on the safe side, 2 there. So the question is can we lose 2 there and still have enough height of action? That was a very unscientific calculation, by the way. But let's mark up what 2 looks like very, very quickly. 2 looks like something like that, and we have to imagine what 2 would do to the angle. Okay, so take it down from there, down by 2. Yeah, we still have an angle. So that's a very crude thing, but you could draw it out if you wanted to be precise. You could draw it out on a board or something. So that's a precursor. I'm just thinking it through and saying, have I got enough room to remove this material? Now, I would like 2.2 and 1.5 as my target thing, and like I said, I know that typically that would be removing 1.5 and 1 across there. Now we know that's probably more like 2 and 1.75 when you, as measured on here. All right, but let's say we were, let's say we were going to take this conservatively and safely, right? Let's low E end, high E end, okay? And forget the compensation for a minute, we're not going to draw that in. So what we're saying is we might take 1.5, that's bad, that's really bad. What do we say, 1.5 at this end and 1 at that end. So let's say 1.5 and 1 at that end off our actual saddle. Now we know, because of the way it translates, we know that still won't, that will give us a slightly more than that. But I quite like to do it that way. It's conservative, right? So what I'd rather do is take the 1.5 down to 1 off there, put the saddle back in and check for the brake angles over the strings. So, and if it's still good and we're confident in it, then, and we feel like it, we can then take a little bit more off. But we're in the zone of literally a little bit more, and we know that that is probably we're probably taking another 1/4 millimeter at most off the bass side. Okay, so that would be my start point. But before I do that, before I work on that, I think what would be good is to just look at those nut slots at this end. Now what I know is, or we all know, is that there are 3 key interrelated variables here. This first fret action is one variable, the last fret action that I measure is another one, and the neck relief is another. So if I change any one of those, so for example if I raise the action here, also it increases slightly the first fret action at this end. If I decrease the last fret action at this end, it also very slightly decreases it at this, because we're dealing with basically triangles with a curved bottom. What we also know is if we adjust the relief in here, that the feel of the guitar in the middle part will feel like it feels like it's got a higher action here than it might do around about here, which is it can make a big difference to how it feels. But thinking about these two things, if for example maybe one, if you have to nail down one in order to make a decision about the other, it may make more sense to capo this to start with. So if this is really high and all over the place, if you capo it, what you've done is you've made this your new first fret. What you've done is you've probably made this, by normal geometry, about 0.1 or 0.2 of a mil. Now what you can say to yourself is, actually let's pretend I've set that roughly what is the action here now, and actually it's almost the same. We've got 3.5. It makes the correct action at this end translates into a very tiny change at this end. So it may be smarter to do it in the order of set your neck relief, which I've just done, and I'll double check that. I did a little tweak on the rod and now it's very nice and small. Second one is go to this one because it makes the smaller of the differences to this one, in which case we get the we'll go straight to it now and we'll get the feeler gauge that. Now for an acoustic I'll go to 0.4 as opposed to the 0.3 that I normally do with an electric, but let's have a feel. So this is still quite a way over 0.4, and so what I'll do is I'll aim for just increasing it a little bit, but I'll use two tools here. I'll use I'll do a slight where's it gone? Slight increase of the slot itself. It's already got a kind of slot in the curved surface, so I'm going to just widen that slot just slightly so that whatever I do with the nut file in the bottom is not going to get caught on the way down. So I do a little bit just to widen up the access before I then go in with the chosen correct nut file, and I'm keeping a bit of a backwards angle so that we can keep that angle correct and it comes up over the top of the nut. And I'm just basically going to keep working that until I get to the target action of 0.4. Now this is nice quality bone, so it's not going to cut quickly, but it will cut. My experience is it will cut quite consistently. So what I'm aiming to do is I'm just aiming to keep the that thing file at the same angle as the strings going back. There we go, we're just starting to buzz, so that one's now set well. And then I'm going to switch out for my next trick, and then actually that's, looking at this, that has I've done my typical thing of slightly wimping out on this. Let's go back a tiny step. It's often something I do. I go in there and I hear it make any noise and I go, ah, that's it, I'm done. But I look at this and I can still see a gap. So I'm just going to do that a tiny bit more. And I think experience comes in when we're just on the mark now. Experience comes in when you have to guess when to stop, basically. Okay. This one off. Again, I'm going to do a little bit with the thingy, jeweler file. Just open the slot up, because the target of this is to have it working so you don't get any pings at the end. So the strings are moving smoothly and cleanly through the slots. In my ebook I showed how to do this with only the diamond shaped or triangular shaped file, this baby here, and it's entirely possible to do. The only thing to keep in mind is technically it puts perhaps a sharper point at the bottom of the slot, which could grip the strings in a way you didn't want them to. That's one thing to think about. So in my ebook I recommended that you get some of those very inexpensive welding nozzle cleaners to help you round out the shape of the bottom of the slot, which is, it's a lot of faff, but it actually might not be a bad precaution to take. In reality, I found that these files are rarely so sharp that they cut so constrictive a slot that you end up with the strings binding. That's just my experience of it. So in my experience, you tend to be able to get away with just that file. But to cover all bases, I recommend you get those, if you're going to do it the inexpensive way with this, get those welding nozzle cleaner files and have them handy for rounding out the bottom of the slot. So I've still got a bit of fresh air there, and this is quite a critical part now, because you can sometimes get the bone won't cut, and then suddenly it kind of lurch forward and cut, and you find yourself overdoing it because the gaps are so small. Now often when I'm doing a setup in the price, I always include a new bone nut if needed, and in this case this is so nicely fitted and it's already high enough and I can work down onto the existing bone that I'm not putting a new nut in. The price of the nut in the setup is actually quite small, because I buy them in bulk or Chinese and cut them down to, you know, modify them as I go to my own slots and so on. But you know, so it's always on the basis of necessity, and in this case it just isn't necessary. There'd be no advantage to knocking this good quality pre-existing nut out. What we have to do to it is what you see me doing now, which is to just take it down to the exact first fret, consistent first fret action all the way across, and just very carefully taking your time with it. That's the main thing. Quite often strings break when I take them down at this point, or the high E does, so I'm quite glad that this hasn't so far. And then I switch over basically and do the top three in the same fashion. There's a little bit of fret wear on here, but absolutely nothing that I would attack the frets for. It's definitely, you know, it's not going to be a showstopper, in that I would say that it's not even wear that would noticeabely impact how it plays under the fingers. It's not going to be notchy particularly, so it would not be a priority for me in terms of fret leveling, just to get rid of a cosmetic wear until it becomes so bad that you have to. And you know, funnily enough, you have someone like Brian May who played his Red Special for 50 plus years or something now, and at the time of, I don't know, not so far back interview, he was saying that he had never refretted it yet. And you could see, I think it was in the Red Special book, which I have to send back to Paul. Yeah, you could see they were worn, amazingly worn, but evidently not so much as to spoil the playing action for him, or the playing experience. We're right just about on the mark with this one, so I'm going to do a couple of little more wee kisses, and we're on to the next one. So what I didn't say at the beginning of this is that most acoustics, in my experience, I've been able to get a very nice playing action out of them without doing anything in the way of fret leveling. So that target of 2 at the last fret, 2 millimeters at the last fret, that's entirely doable in my experience on acoustics without needing to level. So it's a very rare thing that it'll be worse than that and require fret leveling. Which is why the acoustic setup is typically a little bit cheaper. I'm on the wrong one anyway. Get back up. So occasionally I just give the little teeth of these things a little brass, was it brass? Yeah, brass wire brush, because they do get clogged up with bone. Sounds like some sort of murder weapon, but so it's good to just keep them as good as they can be. And then sometimes the back end doesn't get so much use, so switch around and have a go at that side. We're very close to it now. Yep, on the mark. So that, remember, that's a gap of 0.4 of a millimeter. Gap of 0.4 millimeters. I think this one might be on the mark actually, as is. Yeah. In fact, it's a little bit lower, but I'm going to leave that one as is. What I might just do is just widen put a tiny bit of widening in there, leaning backwards as well, so I'm not lowering the front edge, and that just gives it lessens the chances of it pinging and grabbing sticking in the slot, is what I meant to say. Yeah, so that's great. Those are now done close to where I like them. It's out of tune slightly, but it's a whole lot easier to play down this end. Now I think that if I go back, just have a quick look, I think I've slightly wimped out on these lower ones, so I might just revisit. It's only the E. I'll revisit the lower E just ever so slightly. Can't really get to it with the other bit of the blade. So it's okay. Okay, so that's the relief set and the smallest, well not smallest, the least affecting of the other two variables taking care of the first fret action. Now what I know now is that this is tuning smoothly, there's no pinging, so that gives me a good idea that's stable tuning, that will produce stable tuning when the guitar is restrung with new strings and the strings are stretched out. So now we're on to the sort of the final part of the thing. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to stick a capo across the frets. One thing I didn't mention I was going to say is that when you put a capo on with a typical, even with a high action actually, the geometry dictates that the first fret action is always around about 0.1 if you've got a low action. If it's got a particularly high action, maybe about 0.2. So the 0.4 we've gone down to there of the real first fret action coming out of the bone nut is actually still conservative compared to what you get with the capo. And if you want to know how your guitar can feel, stick a capo on it. That's how it, more like it should feel. And you'll notice that if you're worried about going low with your first fret, you'll notice the first fret coming out of here, if you want to measure it, the new first fret, is going to be significantly lower than your open first fret with your current nut. Because it tells you you can go right down to whatever the capo gives you, unless of course the neck now is too flat or the action is too low, in which case a combination of a low first fret action, flat neck and low last fret action means you'll eventually get buzzing or fret slap and so on. But if you can put a capo on your own guitar and go, wow, that plays like a dream, well, you can improve it because it means you've got all of that room to take out. Now, like I say, I go conservatively, so my 0.4 is still quite a bit above the action given over your new first fret when using a capo. But I do it to give me room. It gives me room not only at this end to move down if I want to, but it gives me room to lower this so that my 0.4 at that end, when I've lowered this, will go down to maybe 0.3.5 or something. I've never been bothered to measure it precisely because it's not that precise. So the next thing is we want to see what we can do here. Okay, and so I'm gonna, that's why I got the capo out. I'm only going to put this on just to keep the strings from falling off, because I'm going to take them, I'm going to need to take them loosen them off substantially enough to allow me to get this saddle out, but I don't want them to fall right off the pegs if I can help it. It would be a pain. It's not the end of the world if they do, but sometimes the capo is quite good to, you know, help them loosen up this end but not quite loosen up at the other way around. Doesn't always work. Sometimes they insist on coming off anyway. Like I say, sometimes when you undo the high E, sometimes it can break because it's just had enough of being under tension and being wound on and unwound and so on. Okay, so now we've got that undone. Sometimes I still find it difficult to get it out, so I will use. Have I got a Morris in here? No? Somebody opened that door. Now I don't want to pull the pegs out yet, but I do want the saddle out, so I'm just going to lift it with this fret puller and just pull it in this direction. Now underneath that, underneath that we've got wood. So how is it? What kind of pickup is this? Has this got a different kind of pickup then? All right. It must have. This is not an under saddle unit. That's cool. Is it an LR Bagsy type thing? If so, where is it? It may be a PXO fitted under here. I can't see where it goes to. Right. Ooh, what's that? That's a piece of metal. That's some sort of clip. I've never seen that. I'm just going to look in here. Give me some light. Okay, it's a little clip holding the wire. Okay, I've seen that. So, I don't know, can't quite see where the pickup ends up. That's a clip holding the thing. I don't know where the pickup is, but it doesn't appear to be in an under saddle one anyway, because that is plain wood sitting there facing me. But wherever it is, this has to play a role in transmitting the vibration of the string through. Okay, so now with this to hand, let me just move this stuff out of the way for a minute. What we've got is we've got the saddle out, and I have a feeling that this is plastic. if it's bone, it's incredibly, it's not really important what it is, it will do either which way. If it's very, very vitreous hard plastic, it does the job fine. I can't imagine that it's bone with these little tiny holes drilled in it, but anyhow, the nut certainly is. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to get the measury things, and we're going to look at what a bass end to treble end line of what we said was conservative or a safe amount was 1.5 down to 1, and that would give us less. It won't get us to the 2mm last fret action. It will get us a little bit higher than that, but it's a, if anything, it's a conservative start point, a safe start point. So I'm going to place this here. I'm going to show you what the 1.5 looks like, and then we're going to go 1 at this end. Again, this is somewhat unscientific because, as you can see, pen has a certain thickness. You know, it's never going to be absolutely precise to the micron. Now, also what I know is that there's a degree of angle on this, or wedge. So when I run this down here, we're going to see it decreasing as we get to the treble end, right? And this isn't waterproof marker, so it probably is going to go squelching everywhere. But that's my start point. Okay. So it changes slightly not the camber, I wouldn't say, but changes slightly the gradient of action on this guitar, only very, very slightly, to get it down to where we want it. Now I'm going to start with just holding this in place, and now because it's got a slightly different amount at the bass end over the treble end, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of place some extra emphasis on the bass end first as I start to take it down, and less emphasis on the treble end. So I'm kind of putting my weight down the bass end deliberately, and then looking at what we've got. We're starting to even out, and once it evens out, then I'm in a better place to fine tune it. And then the real consideration then is to get this thing down to the line that you want, but in such a way that it retains a nice, what's the word I'm looking for, a nice right angled bottom. Okay, so that's tilting a bit towards me at the moment, so I'm now going to manually tilt back a little bit and then try and hold it in place until I think it's recovered its right angle at the bottom. And I can see the line still. We're not there yet. We're about the same amount all the way down. Now we have a nice 90 degree. Well, you can see that. So I'm heading down to take away is this going to come off? Probably will. Heading down to take away my first amount of material, and what I can do is, if I'm in the mood, I can tighten up, and if I'm feeling in the mood to check, I can immediately. Of course, the neck isn't going to be fully under the load, so it will be slightly a dishonest reading, but I can check where I'm getting to, and I'm still quite a bit over 2.5, but it's come down, obviously. Where am I at now? Oh no, I'm on about 2.5. So as you can see, I'm going to loosen this off now. We can either go. Let's be conservative and play safe for a minute, right? It's only a matter of a few minutes of trying something out. So let's take this and do this up. I'm not too worried about the bird's nest of wires or whether they're totally tidy at this end. What I want to do is put them under load for a minute. And then we'll have a look at the feel of the guitar at this point. And then we know that we have, not only have we got some more to take out if we want to. Look at the action. Action's looking fine. Sorry, the that thing. Brake angle's looking fine. Obviously we haven't got it tuned up yet. Can I have some power please? It's fading fast, this machine, that little tuner.
Now the other thing about this is, let's say it did come from the factory with a too high saddle. One of the things sometimes you can tell about that is that they tend to lean forward if they're too tall. They don't do well if the slot is only a certain depth but the saddle is so much higher, because they do tend to pull forward, and that does also slightly affect your intonation. Okay, so with all the strings loaded, we're back to just over 3mm. So we haven't really. Let me borrow this again. Sorry. What are we at? No, we're just on 3. So we've lost 0.5 millimeter. So we've got room to go the rest of that hog without any problem at all. We won't get close. If we go down to the line, we won't really even get close to the 2 millimeters last fret. We'll probably end up at about 2.5 on this first markings, shall we say. But my recommendation would be, if you're going to do this, do it in stages. It's only a matter of, it only costs you a bit of tuning up and tuning down sort of thing. Yeah, to be sure. If you go at it all in one go, you'd be surprised. You can sometimes just overcook it, and before you know it, you're fitting a new one. It's perfectly easy to do. This is a very standard saddle, compensated saddle, but it's just going to be easier. Oh hell, I've already got something there. It will just be easier if you're not recovering. No, this isn't going to stand now. Let's just put it where we had it. Over there, please. I'll get the thing up. Yeah, better to do it slowly and safely. Okay, so I'm going to continue working this down to the mark. What I tend to do is I tend to move rather than move the piece, because I found that gives me a much more consistent flat bottom. Flat bottom, girls. Yeah, so we've got quite a bit to go. If it's not moving fast enough, you can go back to your rougher grit, but that's harder to get a right angle on. It'll take more material, as you can hear, but you have to stop with enough spare that you can level up if you've gone off on a little bit of a tilt. So if it's not totally perpendicular, you've got to give yourself room to enough material to regain your flat bottom. I think I might just carry on this for a minute and pick it off in bulk. So again, it's one of those things that's based on experience to know how much you need to leave to achieve that. Got about, realistic, it doesn't look like much, but actually there's about 1 millimeter to go technically if you want to go this whole first stage. Okay, right, now I think that's coming close to the mark, and now what I'm going to refocus on is the squareness of the bottom, which I think is pretty good. I'll just recheck. So like I say, keeping the whole of you moving rather than moving your hands is pretty much the only way to get you a nice level. Okay, well, I'm still above the line, so I'm still playing it. I'm still playing it quite safe. All right, and actually there's a slight tilt back on this now, if anything. So I'm just going to put it on the floor again and just rebalance that with the last tiny bit of material. And then once we're there,
I can call that done to the first line really. Yep, that's good. So that's our first conservative marker that we made anyway. We know we're well within the safety zone of not getting too far down. The first check I made was to just get an eyeball on the break angle of the strings. Make sure we didn't go off too low on that without spotting what's going on. And again, these strings now are doing a great job of being sacrificial strings. Just their only purpose now is just to help us set the things we want to set, really. Okay, so that's now coming down, but actually it's still not massively low, but it is a conservative thing, and we can then re-examine the break angle just to make sure we're good. Still loads of angle. It tends to be that the high E gets the least of all in the end. We tend to run out of angle on that one, but this is still more than enough. We're at about just over the 2.5 mark, and down on this side we're at again just over the 2. So we have a little way we could go, but you know, I'm going to stop here, and the reason I'm going to stop here is I can already feel the scale of the improvement this will make to John's guitar, and I don't think it's always the thing to do to go after an absolute target. We've got enough room. Let's do it a little tiny bit more, and we are talking now a few scrapes more, just to be, well, actually it's half a mil more, but why not, since we've got plenty of angle, nothing to worry about on the bridge itself, the saddle. What I'll do afterwards, I'll also give this a whole clean up. Oh, is that still tight? There's a bit. I'll give it a whole clean up as well because it's a bit rubby. And I'll take the tuners off and do the headstock as well while I clean up the dust from the work on the saddle. Sorry, on the nut. Okay, so when you're reducing this, what you do get is, of course, you reduce the amount of material you've got to grip when you're pulling it out, so you have to be conscious of that. Now with this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a line down here of approximately the same thickness all the way down, if I can even get it to do that, but I just want a visual mark for my own sort of sanity to work to, barely getting anything biting on there, just so I know, and it is going to be less than half a millimetre, I would say, by the time this is done. I just want something to eyeball because I get nervous without it. just see that taking that down to the bottom just fine. Taking just about all the pen off. There we go. That's going to be it for this job. But, you know, done cautiously, which is a much better way to do it. Ruler out of the way. Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick last check, tune up. After that it's going to be time to bin these strings. They've done their service. And oh well, good. Again, give them a little bit of a pull. Every time you take them off and on, they're going to gather up some slack around the posts, so just for the sake of sanity while trying to get them into tune, it makes sense to give them a pull. So everything plays even with that reduction. Just putting these last little bit of tugging. Okay, I'm going to stop there. We could go more, and I guess the secret of moral of this story is, John, if you get to a point where you want to do more, you can do just what I did with that. Everything else will be set the same as it is, but you could take another 0.5 millimeter off that comfortably and it would still play very nicely. I'm not going to do it just because I think it's quite good where it is, and we're just about on the 2.5 mark, which is not far actually. We're on about 1.5, so we're just a little higher than I would have done on my own guitars, but that is quite low for most people. So the point to be made here is that what I've done already in the slight adjustment on the nut slot and the lowering of that makes playing difference, a feel difference, so you will tangibly notice the difference in this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take off all of the strings and bin them. They've done their service, thank you very much. I've got a replacement set of Martin 1253s, some new strings, but before I do that, a bit off camera I think, I'm going to give everything a clean. I'll take the tuners off too, even though it takes a couple of minutes extra. I like to do that so I can get a clean run, or a good run at cleaning the headstock. If you do it around the tuners, to be fair, you almost never get it to look good. That's another hole in me. I hate when strings do that. When strings go bad. Okay, so that'll be that. I'll cut these little fellas up right now because I've had it with them. Thank you for your service. Sounds like one of those American radio phone-in shows. Thank you for your service. And I gently just loosen these. I don't bite or pull or anything. It's just a much better way of doing it than those silly thing that's supposed to work on the back end of your string winder. It never does. So these fret pulling files are actually very useful in lots of different settings like this. Right, out you come. Right, there you go. Grubby strings in the bin. Full on, all over clean. And then I'll come back and restring. And really, on a guitar like this, the next part of it is to restring. Well, we're going to oil the board as well, but it's a matter of restringing, stretching out, and all the setup work's done, so you actually don't have to do anything other than that. These are a bit loose, so they could have done tightening up anyway, but it's no big thing. But it's a bit grubby all over, so I'll give it a nice refresh. I'll do that off camera, so I'll stick the radio on and vegetate out a little bit for a while. Okay, see you in a bit. Okay, so polished up everything with the scratch remover Eterna Shine, which is great stuff. Expensive but worth it. So it gives the sort of, it's like a what do they call that stuff? Teacup, but milder. But it takes the grime and disappears it, so you get a lovely shiny finish. In fact, it's so shiny right now that it will pick up dust at the slightest kind of touch. So I have to give this a sort of final wipe down before it goes back in its case. Otherwise, it just picks up dust here and there. Missed again. Right. So I'm now ready to replace or put new strings on. Oh no, I'm not. I've got to put the tuners back on. Oh, in the order they came off. Yeah, so boring. On go the tuners. Like I say, if you're cleaning the headstock, just take the time to take the tuners off, because you'll get underneath and around them in a way that you just never will if you're trying to work around them when they're already in place. And then we'll flip it over, put back in the tuner screws, do them up, and then do the nuts up on this side, and we'll be good to restring and stretch out. And that's it then for an acoustic. But it's on the basis that these tiny adjustments, or relatively tiny adjustments, make a pretty massive payoff in playing experience. And that's what I like about it. So you can see this thing is right now shiny as anything, despite the fact that it's trying to pick up fingerprints every time I touch it. Now let's get that motorized one, put it down to 1. Thank you. Yesterday I took down our old, but very sturdy washing line to fit a new one, and I had to cut the old one away, and it's made of galvanized, very big, thick galvanized steel. So, and I was running out of time because I had to take it over to my stepmom's skip before she emptied it today. So I had to work really frantically hard with the hacksaw. And it's a decent quality hacksaw, but my God, that's when I really feel the impact of the bike accident I had years ago on my joints, because this hand now, having cut through about 5 different sections of that galvanized steel, they're really protesting right now. Okay, so we just tighten these up and we'll be ready to restring. It's been a while since I restrung an acoustic. think. Can't remember when the last one was. But it's the same. We do the same principle as John had on here, and as I do on electrics and acoustics. We'll go one over and one under to make a sort of slight locking thing for the minimum amount of excess material wound on. Okay, so we're now ready with the things. Let's put back in the saddle. Let's get the strings out and on our way. Okay. Twing. So the secret with these things is to make sure your barrel bit is right down in the guitar body, because if it's not, if it's caught on the edge of the pin, it'll tell you about it later on by shooting upwards with a bang. So get it part of the way in and then pull up, and basically the string ends up being, sorry, the ball of the string ends up being kind of halfway up the length of the peg, which seems a bit odd when you first work it out, but well, that's kind of where it's supposed to go. Right now it doesn't want to do that, so it's going to, that one potentially will pop out. Okay. So again, this is one that once I finish this, I'll take it inside and give it a sort of final dust down, polish up indoors. Just make sure you get it back in the box without any more dust building up on it. Alright, there we are. Loaded. And on there. And now let's just, while I'm here, let's line these all up to make the job easier. Otherwise we'll just be doing it later on. There we go. Now, my rule of thumb is if you get the slots right on your nut to begin with, i.e. so that they don't ping at all from the start, then you don't need to add stuff like nut sauce and or graphite stuff. Okay, I'm just going to cut this before I go round another time. Yeah, so you know that's always been my principle. So when you see a guitar that I've set up come back to you, it almost certainly won't have any graphite in the slots, because I'll have done everything I need to do to make it play in tune, or stay in tune I should say, to make the slots correct without needing any lubricant. Because a lubricant really is basically it's a temporary solution to the problem of a badly cut or sanded nut slot. So you don't want it, you want to get the slots right first time. So that's why you won't find any graphite on my setups, even though I've got plenty of it kicking around if I wanted to use it. I just, you know, I realised at some point in history that it was only a temporary solution, and if you resorted to it, then if I resorted to it to make a guitar sound or play great or stay in tune, then it was only going to be a matter of time before my customer found the guitar and you know the nut slots sticking again, in which case it'll upset them and it will look, you know, do no good for my reputation. So it's a false economy as far as I'm concerned. So I will spend the time to get that right. Off while we've got access to it. Oh well, that went down the back. I'll save that for a spring clean. Well, I'm pleased I'm kind of up on the game now, which is good. I've got another guitar to set up this weekend. Today is Friday, so I've got one more to set up this weekend. And I've got a neck to finish off that I've refinished. Thank you. And finally, now these might be slightly different gauge to what was on here before, so I'm just going to not assume that everything runs smoothly through the nut yet, and it may need some widening with sandpaper, but again the same principle. I'm not going to look to cure it with graphite. I'm going to make sure I get it taken care of with widening the slots, and I do that sometimes with a blade and some wet and dry. So I'm just going to do a first bend out of all the, or whatever slack in the strings that I can get my hands on before I do the first tune up. To my little device. Power, please. Quick strum. Pull, 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 pull. Pull, pull, pull. Now here's where I'm listening for pings at the nut. And hearing to see if it's a linear process. So what you'll get is, if there's any binding there, you'll hear pings, but you'll also feel that the strings aren't going through linear fashion. So you'll tune and nothing happens, and then suddenly the pitch will go up, as you know, in sort of jumps, I suppose you could call it, and that's a good indicator that it's not quite free running at the moment. So this process of stretching the strings out to get everything stable is the best point to hear and feel what the nut slots are doing. And if by the time you've done all the stretching out you're confident that the slots are letting the strings pass through in a linear fashion without causing any sticking, then you'll have a guitar that will play in tune. It'll be easy to tune up to begin with, assuming of course that all this slack is taken out. And that can only be done, as I said before, by the process of stretching. So the detuning right now is purely the residual slack. Okay, so we've dropped a millimetre off the action down to 2.5 and down to 2. Yeah, I like it. I'm not going to go beyond that. I'm going to leave that little bit of I don't know what the word would be, a little bit of slack, no, space for future adjustment, because otherwise if I go down to the lowest possible action you ain't got nowhere to go. So what this means is if you do start to put this through a bit of a dehumidification process, it means you can allow it to go down a little bit more, probably another half to 0.75 of a mil before you need to replace the saddle. So there you go, set up on a Yamaha with slightly bellying top, an improvement at both ends in the action.